One of the more interesting things that the old books give in respect to the Drekkana is the Drekkana of the moon. They only do this for the Drekkana Varga, giving the results of the moon. And for some reason, the old texts focus on the moon a little bit in this Drekkana. The reason that is because the Drekkana, as I've mentioned, is exerting what's in our consciousness. And of course, our consciousness is the moon. So obviously the moon is going to become an important planet to look at in the Drekkana. The moon is also the second planet, and the Drekkana is the third Varga. And we've already learned that if we take all the numbers in the number 2, 1 plus 2 equals 3. So it makes sense that the moon is an important player in the Drekkana. So the old text gives some interesting things about this. Jataka says, if the moon is in his own or friendly Drekkana, the person will be handsome and virtuous. If the moon is in other Drekkanas, the person will get the characteristics of the Lord of the Drekkana. So, based on, we first look at the dignity of the moon. If it's in an own or friendly sign, the person is handsome and virtuous. So again, we get that word virtue attached to the Drekkana, which means someone who behaves well in accordance with others and takes others into account in that which they do. And that's basically what virtue is. It basically means not living selfishly. Then if the moon's in other Drekkanas, the person will get the characteristics of the Lord of the Drekkana. So if the moon is in the Drekkana of Saturn, for instance, Capricorn or Aquarius, they'll get a Saturnian nature. Now, all texts don't agree with that. Another text says if the moon occupies either her own or friendly, the native will get good appearance and good qualities, just like Jataka. If the moon occupies a neutral decanate, the qualities will also be of a medium nature. If the moon is in an enemy's decanate, the native will not possess any good appearance or any good qualities. So they take it a step further and determine the level of virtue of what's in their consciousness based on the dignity of the moon in the Drekkana. So the moon's dignity in the Drekkana is important. In any case, the person will always take on the nature of the Lord of the Drekkana, whether it's in a friendly sign or an enemy sign, whatever, they'll still have some of those qualities. So if the moon's in a sign of Saturn in the Drekkana, the person will have more Saturnian detached qualities, and so on. Okay, so why is that? Because that planet's going to have a rule over the person's consciousness. Okay? Then Jataka goes on to say, if the moon is in a serpent, armed, quadruped, or bird Drekkana, the person will be vindictive, very cruel, fouling guru's wife, and traveler respectively. So they'll be vindictive if it's in a serpent Drekkana, cruel in an armed Drekkana, fouling guru's wife if in a quadruped Drekkana, and a traveler if in a bird Drekkana. So this gives us a clue about some of the effects of these different Drekkanas. But before I talk about that, we're going to jump into this other text below, which says the native will become hot-tempered, wicked, or cruel if the moon is in a serpent decanate. The native will be very mischievous and murderous if the moon is in an armed decanate. The native will be addicted to one's religious preceptor's wife if the moon is in the quadruped decanate. The native will become a traveler if the moon be in the bird Drekkana. So we have a clue about what these 4 Drekkanas do. Bird Drekkanas incline one to travel. Moon in a bird Drekkana will do that. Okay? In a serpent Drekkana, it makes a person vindictive, wicked, cruel, that kind of thing. Cruel, mischievous, murderous, violent, possibly, if in an armed Drekkana. Obvious. And addicted to one's religious preceptor's wife if the moon be in a quadruped decanate. Well, quadrupeds are mammals, and mammals breed sexually, and they have a lot of sexual energy, as a rule. So when the moon's in a quadruped Drekkana, it just increases the person's sexual energy. The most extreme of that is somebody who will have sex with anybody, which means they'll actually have sex with their guru's wife, which is like the extreme of who you'll have sex with in the old text. Okay? These days, just look at it to mean a person who's more sexually active, more sexually passionate because of that quadruped nature. Okay? but you don't have to apply the literal interpretation, okay? So the moon is an important planet to look at. In our example charts, we'll be looking at the moon's Drekkana always, okay? In respect to the Lagna's Drekkana, if the Lord of the Drekkana of the Lagna is strong, the person will achieve the status like that of a king. So if your Drekkana Lagna Lord is strong, it helps you succeed in life. Okay? It gives you force with which to exert what's in your conscious and mind to have better success. In a dual sign, the three decanates in the order. So in a dual sign, the three decanates will be Adama bad, Madhyama average, and Uttama good or best. Okay? So in a dual sign like Gemini, Virgo, Sag, or Pisces, the first Drekkana is going to be bad. The second is going to be medium. And the third is going to be best. Okay, so it's a simple logic here. When we break the zodiac, we have 1, 2, 3, Aries, Taurus, Gemini. Gemini, a dual sign, is the third type of sign. Again, Cancer, Leo, Virgo. Virgo is the third sign type of sign. Dual signs are the third type of sign. So in a dual sign, the best place for the Lagna to be in is the third part of it, the last Drekkana, the third Drekkana. And the worst part is the opposite of that, which is the first Drekkana. Okay? So the person will get through life a little more smoothly if they have the best Drekkana Lagna. Okay, meaning the third Drekkana if it's a dual sign. In a movable sign, it's reversed. So in a movable sign like Libra, the first is best. The second is medium. The third is worst or bad. And actually, the better way to look at this is best, medium, worst, not bad. So worst, medium, best. It's a qualification. It's not like it's a bad thing. It's more of a qualification thing. It's best in the first Drekkana if it's a movable sign like Libra, Capricorn, Aries, and Cancer. It's worst if it's the third Drekkana in those signs. Okay? And this logic is the same. The movable signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, are the first type of sign. So having the Lagna in the first third of that is best, and the last third is worst. Okay? And in the fixed signs like Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, and Taurus, it's fixed sign, the first is the worst. The second is the best. And the third Drekkana is medium. Okay? So again, dual signs or fixed signs are the second type of sign. And so the second Drekkana is the best. The first is the worst, and the third is so-so medium. Okay? So if your life will be a little smoother, a little easier if the Drekkana Lagna falls into this place. Okay? If during the birth time, the rising, and again, we'll see some examples of that so you can see those in working. But for now, remember the principle, pretty simple principle to remember, and then apply it to some charts, and we'll look at some charts too soon. If during the birth time, the rising decadent be either serpent or fetter, and if the sign of its ruler be afflicted, the person will also suffer imprisonment of the nature of such sign. So, if you have the Lagna is in a serpent or fetter Drekkana, and if the sign that its lord is in is afflicted, the person, it's a combination for imprisonment and bondage. Okay? Again, those Drekkanas can be troublesome, and the serpent Drekkanas in the same situation can be troublesome for your health. Alright, then the old books go on to give the effects of the different Drekkanas. The first Drekkana of Aries, second Drekkana of Aries, and so on. These are good to use to adjust a person's time, to make sure they're in the right Drekkana. Again, I like the images, the symbolic images more, but as a secondary thing to look at, these can be a useful thing. In in the manual you have here, we have the effects of the Lagna Drekkana from Yavana Jataka and from Saravelli. The first paragraph is from Yavana Jataka, and the second is from Saravelli. Yavana Jataka is the older. Saravelli bases his knowledge on Yavana Jataka. Okay? So if we were to look at some Drekkana person, like let's go take Libra for instance. And we know the person's a Libra, but we want to decide what they're like, we can use these Lagna Drekkanas. Or if we know their time is right, and we just want to get a feel for them, we can read these Libra Drekkanas. One born in the first Drekkana of Libra is dark-skinned and looks like Cupid, clever and intelligent. He is wise in the ways of fine arts and of merchandise, and well-versed in mantra. He is a jester who engages in service and wandering. Second Drekkana is, in the second Drekkana of Libra is born a famous man with eyes wide as lotuses and a beautiful form and voice. One who keeps a prosperity gained by his ancestors, a man who is fond of laughter but behaves harshly, or a friend of the king. And then the third, a man born in the third Drekkana of Libra is an ungrateful rogue who is fickle and ugly, one who is hypocritical, polite. His body is slender and black, his friends are dead, and he has little intelligence but possesses wealth and money. So, these are three very different qualities, three very different people. So, we really see how Libra Lagna can be much different. And you see the first Drekkana of Libra, which is the best Drekkana of Libra, is the most Libra-like. He looks like Cupid, he's clever and intelligent, he's wise in the ways of fine arts and merchandise, well-versed in mantra, he's a jester who engages in service and wandering. Libra is a movable sign, which means the wandering, the traveling. This is the best Drekkana of Libra, and you can see by the description. The worst is the third description. The third of Libra is an ungrateful rogue who is fickle and ugly, who is hypocritically polite. His body is slender and black. His friends are dead, and he has little intelligence but possesses wealth and money. So this is a guy, only thing good he has for him is the money. So, you see, that's the worst Drekkana of Libra. So the descriptions they give for the first, second, and third Drekkanas, as well as the images of the Drekkanas for the first, second, and third, will tend to follow this, scheme of which Drekkana is best within that sign. So those things sort of work together. Okay? So, when you look at the Lagna Drekkana, find out if it's in the first, if it's in the best, medium, or worst part, just to get a feel if they're using the qualities of that sign, whether it's Libra, Cancer, Taurus, whatever, most effectively, which is when it's in the best Drekkana, least effectively when it's in the worst Drekkana, or to an average effect if it's in the medium Drekkana. And then to get more of a picture in your mind of how they're using that sign, best, worst, or medium, you can read the descriptions of the Drekkanas and get a better pictorial idea or, way that they're going to use it. And again, you'll find these descriptions of the Drekkanas to be pretty accurate. You'll never find them to be 100%, but you'll usually find these to be about 70%. 7 out of 10 things they say will hold true to that person. So just try it on your Lagna Drekkana and you can see how these descriptions really hold true well. And in accordance with there being best, medium, and worst parts to each sign. Okay? So a lot of useful information you can get from that. And again, the best, medium, worst is whether you're using that rising sign most effectively, least effectively, or just average with an average effect. And then the results that the old books give let us see in more detail how they're using it most effectively, least effectively, or with an average effect. Okay? Pretty simple. Well, the only way to learn that is just to practice that. No more needs to be said. Just practice, read these descriptions, and apply them to the charts. Now, about these Lagna Drekkanas, Yavana Jataka, the last sutra says, thus has been uttered this rule regarding the qualities and characteristics of those born under the various Drekkanas, by means of their qualities and nature. If the Lord of the Drekkana is strong and aspected by a benefic planet, one should decide that the influence of the Drekkana is not to be modified. So if the Drekkana Lord is strong and aspected by helpful planets, which means it's in good Logitadya Avastas, influenced by friends and so on, then the results in that Drekkana will be very strong. Okay, and the results don't need to be modified. Of course, if the Lord of the Drekkana is afflicted, if it's in bad dignity, if it's hammered by malefics, or not malefics, by enemies, if it is in a bad Logitadya Avasta, basically, then they're not going to really exhibit those qualities that greatly. So say someone is in the first Drekkana of Libra, which is the best, but Venus, in both the Rashi and the Drekkana, is in bad Vajitadya Avastas, they're not really going to use much of that best. You can say the potential's there, but they're not accessing the potential. Okay? So always look to that Drekkana Lord and judge that Drekkana Lord. Okay. Then there's something special called the 22nd Drekkana that you're going to find a lot if you read old books or do longevity or medical astrology. Okay? The 22nd Drekkana is known as the Shara, or perishable Drekkana. It's a Drekkana that has to do with death and destruction. How do you determine it? Well, simply put, it's the Drekkana that's 22 places from the Lagna Drekkana. 22 Drekkanas away. Instead of counting that off, the easy way is that the 22nd Drekkana is the Drekkana of the 8th house. So let's say a person has 5 degrees of Aries rising. 5 degrees of Scorpio is where the 22nd Drekkana is going to fall. So what's the Drekkana of 5 degrees Scorpio? Well, it is Scorpio ruled by Mars. So Mars would become the lord of the 22nd Drekkana. Now let's say that the person had 15 degrees Aries rising. That means they're in the second Drekkana of Aries. Then we go to the second Drekkana of the 8th house, 15 Scorpio. What is the Drekkana lord of that? Well, the middle Drekkana of Scorpio is Pisces, ruled by Jupiter. So Pisces becomes the 22nd Drekkana, and Jupiter becomes the 22nd Drekkana lord. If the last Drekkana of Aries rises, meaning it's from 20 to 30 degrees of Aries, then the 22nd Drekkana is 20 to 30 of Scorpio, which is Cancer ruled by the moon. So the 22nd Drekkana lord would be the moon. So you do that, you just put the degree of the Lagna in the 8th sign from the Lagna, find the Drekkana for that, and that's your perishable or Shara Drekkana. That lord has a greater probability of causing diseases, and it also gets a greater probability of causing death. And you will find that 22nd Drekkana lord being called up in lots of yogas revolving around longevity mostly. Okay? So now you know what it is to use it when you need it. Okay. The old books, when it comes to yogas and Drekkana, there's not that many yogas that are really, really specific. Meaning, there's not a lot of yogas that are specific to Drekkana type things. Most of the Drekkana yogas have to do with prajna, with traveling prajnas, with longevity. Mainly those two things. So in those, and also there's some sannyasi yogas that have to do with the Drekkana. But most of those yogas also include some other vargas, like maybe the Navamsha or something. So they're really not Drekkana-specific yogas. They're more part of a bigger yoga. So we're not covering those in this course. When we deal more with longevity yogas or renunciation yogas, then we will deal with those Drekkana lords more, along with whatever other lords are required to find those yogas. There's not a whole bunch on Drekkanas. But what's really interesting, not a whole bunch of Drekkana-specific yogas. But they do have some interesting things about the Drekkana in respect to dashas. This sutra is from Sanketa Nidhi, but Brihat Parashar or Shastra says the same thing. The effects of the planet would be felt in the beginning, middle, or concluding portion of its major period in accordance with its position in the first, second, or third Drekkana of the sign in which it is posited. What method of period reckoning should be observed should be decided by the astrologer himself according to the directions of the Shastras. So he's saying in whatever period the astrologer decides is the right type of dasha to use, whether Vimshatri, Ashtatari, or whatever, that the planet in its dasha will give its majority effects in the beginning of the dasha if the planet's in the first Drekkana, in the middle of the dasha if the planet's in the middle of the dasha, at the end of the dasha if the planet's in the last Drekkana. Real simple logic. So planets in the first Drekkana give their results early in the dasha. Planets in the second Drekkana give their results in the middle of the dasha. Planets in the third Drekkana give their results at the end of the dasha, the last third. Okay? So that's something you can use to help you. You know, of course, it says, what about my money? And they're in a dasha that's good for wealth. Well, if it's in the second Drekkana, probably most of the money will be made in the second portion of the dasha. Now, a dasha usually has, with Vimshatri, for instance, you've got 9 dasha lords and 9 sub-periods. So the first part of the dasha, so here we have the Mahadasha. And under that, we got 9 dasha lords. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay? If it's in the planet, if the Mahadasha lord, this planet here, is in the first Drekkana, then it'll give a lot of its results in the first 3 Antardashas. If the planet is in the second Drekkana, it will give the majority of its results in the second set of 3 Antardashas. And if the planet's in the third Drekkana of its sign, it'll give the majority of its results during the last 3 Antardashas. So split the dasha up into Antardashas. Don't say, well, it's a 20-year period, so in the first 7 years and the second set of years and whatever, it's in the first 3 Antardashas, second 3 Antardashas, and that's usually the way I do it. And then, let's say you know the planet's in the second Antardasha, or in the second Drekkana, so it's in the second set of 3 Antardashas that's going to give most of its fruit. Then you can look at which of these Antardashas is the strongest to give the same fruits, and that'll be the high point in that Antardasha for that thing, or in that dasha for that thing. So you can kind of just help narrow down the focus of when the dasha lord is going to give bigger effects, okay, or the majority of its effects. So that's one little dasha rule based on the Drekkana, okay. Then this is a neat little rule from Jataka Deshamar. Study any house. When the lords of the 8th house and the 22nd Drekkana are weak, and are in the 6th, 7th, and 8th houses, they cause the destruction of the house during their dashas. Okay, during their respective dashas. So, let's put a Taurus logna here. And we're going to put, say, 15 degrees of Taurus. Okay, the 8th from Taurus, and we don't use bhavas for this, we use signs. The 8th sign from Taurus is Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter. Then, the 22nd Drekkana is going to be the Drekkana of 15 Sagittarius, which is the second Drekkana of Sag. So Sagittarius is the first Drekkana, Aries is the second Drekkana, Mars. Okay? So, when Jupiter Dasha runs, or Mars Dasha runs, or Jupiter Mars, or Mars Jupiter especially, there's a chance that the person's body, the lagna, will be destroyed. If these lords are in the 6th, 7th, or 8th, and weak or afflicted. If those lords are in the 6th, 7th, or 8th, and in bad lagitati avashtas, or combust, or debilitation, anything like that, then they can destroy the lagna. But the good thing about this principle is that it can happen to any bhava. You can use this to judge any bhava. So let's say the lagna is Pisces. And let's say the third bhava cusp falls in Taurus. Then, from the third Baba cusp, Jupiter and Mars are going to rule Jupiter's ruling the 8th Rashi, Mars is ruling the 22nd Drekkana. And if those are in 6th, 7th, or 8th and afflicted, then in their dashas they can destroy third house things. They may kill the sibling or destroy some other third house thing, destroy the person's education, whatever. So you can use this from any Baba cusp. You just find out the lords of the 8th from that cusp and the lords of the 22nd Drekkana from that cusp. And if those lords are in the 6th, 7th, or 8th from the house in question, not from the Lagna, but from the house in question, and if they're afflicted, they can destroy it. Okay, so we always want to look at the dashas of the 8th lord and the dashas of the 22nd Drekkana lord from any Baba to see if that can potentially destroy the Baba. And any dasha you're in is going to be the 8th lord from some Baba. And any dasha you're in will often be the 22nd Drekkana lord from at least one Baba. So there's always the potential of something getting destroyed if those planets are in the 6th, 7th, or 8th from the Baba in question, and if they're in bad Lajitade Bashtas, debilitated or afflicted. Okay? So that's a rule to see when some things can get terminated in the dashas. And one of the things that confuses astrologers, one of the hard things about astrology, is sometimes you just see these charts where something just ends in a person's life. And you're going, where is that in the chart? I don't see it. Well, the reason we don't see it is because we're just not looking at some of the things we should be looking at, such as this little rule from Jataka Desha Marga, which works pretty good. Okay? So the longevity of anything can be terminated during those dashas. Okay? So we'll also be looking at examples with that as in the next video when we get into some actual examples. So there's a lot of little ways to use these Drekkanas, and we will start using them now, and so this will all be